moment, another open to the cameras moment in the Oval Office, meeting with the South African president, President Trump there. A very open conversation. At one point, the president's staff playing out a video showing these claims of genocide in South Africa, which its leader has refuted. An amazing moment, Trace, and welcome everybody. I'm Sandra Smith in New York.
It's been 35 years since the transition, and I know there's a lot of anger, through the transition. There was also a lot of stuff happening in the apartheid days. We grew up in the apartheid era, but I don't think two wrongs makes a right. President Mandela, when he came out of prison for all that time, didn't come out with hatred, and really unified our nation through sport. We've got a great ally we can have, the US. It's always been an ally of South Africa for a very long time, even in the days of the war, up in Angola. You guys helped us. So very important for us to have your support and get the change we need.
Where did you do that well? He might have done that even better than he plays golf, which is almost impossible.
Good day. Welcome to this production of Places of Valour. This is about a war in Angola. Here, the largest land battles, the Cold War, was fought during 1966 to 1989. It expanded over 23 years when two generations of soldiers took place. It involved South Africa, Namibia, Angola, Zambia and Zimbabwe. Also the superpowers, Soviet Union, USA and also Cuba was involved. It almost led to the destruction of a major country, Angola, and it was the start of a liberation struggle for Angola. So this documentary will take you on a journey through the major places where the war took place in Angola. We will visit major sites, and we have participants of the war who will tell their stories and even share their thoughts on how the war was fought.
They asked South Africa, please, we need to help you. Not because South Africa is bad Angola. We have anyway asked South Africa to help us. And South Africa was here, our house was gone. And they come to help us.
I'd like to say to the PW Botha, Mr. President, we've got a new addition to South Africa. It's called Angola. It's all yours.
So they had no cover. They were shot to pieces. I could hear them shouting on the radios, the commanders asking for help. And Colonel Ferreira just said, carry on with the attack, carry on with the attack. So out of 240 men, to have 45 down is a high percentage. To tell you that our romantic view of battle had just disappeared. It wasn't nice anymore.
So, I mean, if you, as you wrote in your own book, and I like the title, Moving the Border, we prefer to fight inside Angola rather than inside Namibia. And that explains, and there, let's face it, SWAPO had big bases.
So Protea was a class of its own, and I reckon in history Protea will stand out as one of the major successes of semi-conventional and conventional war.
To attack them with artillery, to do a big bombardment, and it was one of the biggest bombardments of the war until such stage that the war actually ended.
I'm very excited to commence this journey and share this wonderful story with you. So, let the journey begin. So why I'm sitting here with a lovely river behind me having this discussion? Well, I found myself in the little, not so little anymore, town called Rundu in the northeast of Namibia. And we are set to do a very promising tour where we're going to have a privilege to visit a number of familiar battlefields where the South African Border War, that's a war between 1966 and 1989, took place. So, why is it significant to start my journey at this spot? Well, you see there in the background the beautiful, crystal clean Okavango River. The river that starts deep into Angola and then it enters and forms a border at some point. And to the west of this river, major land battles took place where the South African Defence Force and two opposing forces, FAPLA, Angola's military force, and Southwest African People's Organization, SWAPO, took place. So, as you can see, on the other side of the river, just up there, is the territory of Angola. It's a sovereign country. It became independent in 1975. The war only ended as late as 1988, and the rebel movement were only finally defeated in 1992. So why is this war so significant? Why did it take so long? It's important for historians to dig into the story, to try and understand the war, and to make sense of what happened. I myself, a veteran of the war, where I served at 3rd Battalion in 1983, have a bit of insight and ability to understand how a number of things fit in. But my knowledge is limited to the abundance of sources that's available, oral evidence of many, many veterans. Some of them we can meet this week. We will tell their stories. But during this episodes, we're probably going to visit 17 major places where major battlefields took place, and there were harsh battles were fought. And it seems promising to be able to stand at significant places like Carnaval, Monongwe, towns like Kasinga, Kuvalai, Ivali, Lupa, Jiva Zangongu. These are all familiar names if you have a bit of background about the war. So we're looking forward to the trip and looking forward to share the stories as we continue. So a good story will probably start at the beginning. The problem is with this story, does unfortunately not have that clear start. Modern wars, how do they start? Countries don't declare war. There's conflict. What is defined as a war? Must two opposing forces meet each other on a battleground? Does one force need to invade the sovereignty of another force's territory and vice versa for a war to start? Wars can be lingering and conflicts could exist without it forms a proper war. Does there need to be a military force, at least on both sides? That's interesting questions if we talk about the Angolan Border War. So we probably need to take us back all the way as far as 1965. We had a movement called SWAPO, the military force was PLAN, the People's Liberation Army of Namibia, and then they also have a political party, SWAPO political party. So PLAN started recruiting membership, and their members were eager to leave their home country, go into an unknown territory with promises of education, luxuries, income, but also promises of liberty, which perhaps is play an important part. So these PLAN fighters went over the Namibian border, crossed into probably Zambia, where they were recruited a war area, in Angola, apart from a major group, FNLA, who came from the Congo, from the north, to attack the capital city, Luanda. Our focus is more to the southeast of Angola, at the Cabo province, where the guerrilla forces, that includes Angola's MPLA and the UNITA movements, they started infiltrating into that area. This area run by the Portuguese, and they had a proper Portuguese army supported by all sorts of military equipment, such as aeroplanes and probably the Alouette helicopter that played a major role. So they were mostly situated in centers like Serpa Pinto, which they were called Monongwe, and from there they had small little satellite bases where they could stay, get closer to the scene and patrol. The major challenge was there were pockets of small villages spread all over the area. The Portuguese played a major role. So their strategy was perhaps twofold. The one is to combine the people into a small concentrated areas where they stayed, and move them out of the traditional areas, so they have control over the population and don't have to fight a spread out war. The other tactic was to do hit and run operations using helicopters, where they will attack a village, and perhaps sometimes indiscriminately will fire and kill enemy, but in the process, one should understand, a lot of innocent bystanders, the population, were also involved. So the Portuguese army, not only relying on helicopters, had to move equipment and the logistics, and that's on those roads where a typical guerrilla military force will be active. They will lay ambushes, lay landmines, and sometimes attack some of the smaller Portuguese bases. But coincidentally, not many Swapus tend to enter in the beginning stage of a war into Namibia. We had a little group in September 1965 who went to Bambuland at the Shikasti area, where they mainly played recruiting roles for their party, but not a military force. We know that in early 1966, SWAPO formed 4 small teams, the G1, G2, G3 and G4 teams, with the leaders which were prepared to move in, this time carrying military equipment, weapons and radios, and also literature of all sorts, which they would spread under the population. So significantly, we can mark the date of between 20 and 23 March 1966, when the group somehow entered the Caprivi, exited the Caprivi, entered the Caprivi again. You can see the river across me, perhaps close to this area, and they found themselves right near to the spot I'm now, in the Rundu area, where the locals actually informed the local police, and they somehow had follow-up operations, traced their tracks, and they were in an ambush caught. So, with not many shots fired, nobody injured or killed, they came across this group which were armed, they had military radio equipment, and they were ready to do damage as part of the liberation struggle. So this may qualify not as a criminal group, but a group that's aim was to liberate the country. And that's perhaps some way to define the start of a war. So this continued in the 1960s and well into up till 1975. Now, where do South Africa fit into the situation? We were sitting primarily close to where the Portuguese are, in the Caprivi and the East Kavango, which you probably would refer to as towns like Katima Mulelu and Rundu, because that is the big centers and where most of the roads get together, from where operations took place. So this war continued for another 2, 3, 4 years with very limited need for military involvement. Well, the Air Force was involved because they had to supply the helicopters. It's interesting that they started off with 4 Alouette helicopters, of which one of the 4 Alouette helicopters were already fitted with a 20mm machine gun, which later became known as the gunship. It increased to 6. They obviously have small planes, such as the Cessna, to do reconnaissance. The old Second World War, the Kota double prop aircraft was a workhorse, which did its runs on a regular basis. And then from time to time, larger aircraft like the Hercules C-130 and the C-160 Transol arrived with equipment and deliveries at these major airports. It took a couple of months, 26 August 1966, far to the west at a little place called Ongolobashe, where the South African force, equipped with a big number of helicopters, mostly South African police men, together with their military people, such as the very well-known personnel, Colonel Jan Breitenbach and Brigadier General Kaas van der Wals. So this force were attacked from the air and on the ground. A number of people killed, a number of people escaped. The next was South Africa's major invasion in 1975. During the liberation, the date of liberation of Angola, 11th of November 1975, and what revolved around there. In Angola, we need to focus a little bit because that is where South Africa extensively got involved. Not in 65, but only a decade later in 1975.
Our enemy, the official enemy, was SWAPO, the South West Africa People's Organization, the insurgency to liberate Namibia, South West Africa at the time. We were not supposed to engage FAPLA. We were not in official war with the Angolans. However, they were very much intertwined. FAPLA would provide staging posts for SWAPO to get logistically supplied, and from then to advance into Southwest Africa for attacks on military bases, on towns, ambush, sabotage missions on telephone infrastructure and roads. So they were intermingled. So in our view as juniors, they were one and the same. It was one enemy. However, FAPLA was a conventional force that had come through the 75 war against South Africa. They had tanks, artillery, they were well trained. SWAPO were the insurgents. So you're actually supposed to hold ground, but remember, South Africa would go in, the United Nations would criticize South Africa, we'd say we are not in Angola. Then we would withdraw, hoping that they had learned their lesson and they wouldn't use that route for a while, etc., etc. But we never held terrain in Angola. So that's not actually the way to conduct a war. So it was just, we They incurred a lot of losses in the process, and we hope that at some stage it would deter them from launching attacks.
So this is a never-ending process where you can't find the enemy to wipe them out because the enemy is like ghosts moving around where you can't see them. So you have to focus on smaller, concentrated fighting, which probably is not the way to do fighting in the war. But then slowly things developed as more and more landmines were planted by SWAPO. But the hidden deadly war in a ghost-like manner. South Africa realized that they had a war upon them. What's happening in Angola, what's happening in Zimbabwe, Rhodesia, is now going to take place. So this continued, it's escalated.
Yeah, we arrived there in October '69, and we settled down in Katima. We were staying in tents.
Were you a signal?
I was a sigler. I was a sealer.
So you
I was a MOS operator. MOS operator for Brush. That was listening into enemy radio stations. So, and me and Derek Daffel, we stayed in a tent together, and we decided to build us a sitting room stroke bar, because we were supposed to go for 3 months, but because there was no relief, we stayed for 6 months. We volunteered, you know, and so on and forth. It was a very, very interesting time of my career. Yeah, it was the bats were there.
Just a protection.
Yeah, protection.
For the runway.
Yeah, for the runway, the older runway, because my budget didn't exist. And then we had a contingent of engineers there, of the sappers. We communicated with what's the intelligence, with intelligence, because the enemy used to send all their Morse coded messages in code. So we used to write it down, and then we give it to the intelligence house, and they decode. That's what that
Was that information sent to HQ?
Yeah, radio AK.
Radio AK
Yeah, with the kilowatt, we call it a clock and light.
And then the escalating war. It became a semi-conventional war with big fighting, big military equipment facing each other at Mavinga, Kitukonaval, and Menongwe. But that was at the end of the war, 1987 and 1988, with Namibia becoming independent in 1990. So this concludes my story of the beginning of a war. Thank you. I'm standing here in the middle of the main street of Rundu. As you can see, it's a hustling and bustling town with new developments, very clean, lots of shops, modern shops, new developments. What amazes me is there's not hawkers on every street corner. It's all organized. So Rundu, this little one-horse town where the war started in the 1960s, is now a major center in Namibia. So Rundu is actually a junction where roads meet each other from the east, from the Caprivi, from Wombeland, from the west, and from the south, coming from Grootfontein. And our story will then pause here